Guys, hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the next Candidate ID Talent Talk. My name is Billy McDiarmid. I'm the Head of Client Success here at Candidate ID. I am working from home today. We haven't moved offices. I do apologise in advance if we have any cat-related interruptions. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by three fantastic EVP and EB specialists on today's Talent Talk. We've got Radboud from our friends at VONQ in the Netherlands. We've got Tom, who's Employer Brand Manager at the Nationwide Building Society. And we've got Ben Gledhill, who is the Head of Resourcing for Yodel, based in the UK. Guys, good afternoon. Thank you very, very much indeed for joining us. To everyone that's joined the call, thanks very much for dialing in. You will get a recording of this call sent out to you as well. This is going to be a very, very open conversation. Please do ask your questions on the right-hand side. I will deal with them as and when they come in. And please feel free to abuse our panel. They particularly like that as well. So we're going to dive straight in. We're probably going to take about 45 minutes or so. I want to start off by talking about EVP in particular, but we will open up the conversation into some broader EB areas as we discuss it. Radboud, I wanted to go to you first of all, and I wanted to cover off one thing that's really important to me personally, is talking about EVP that isn't tailored towards specific job families. I know you and the team at VONQ have done quite a lot of work on that. Do you want to tell me about your view on why EVP should be tailored specifically to job types, and tell me about some of the work that you're doing there?
Yeah, great. When you look at the EVP, the employee value proposition, it's very important to look at target groups you want to target and tailor that position to them. And what you want to have is a broad EVP. And when you look at your target groups, it's also interesting to look at the TVP, the target group value proposition, and it differentiates, for example, for sales and IT specialists. So the EVP goes for all the employees you would like to retain and attract as a company. And then you need to zoom in to the different target groups that are important to you and your company, and then write down the USPs for those specific target groups. And in a whole, I think that's the best way to look at an EVP and a tailored one.
So is this about taking, what we would normally do with personas from a marketing sense and starting to run it right through the entire employer brand process? Yeah,
you can look at it as a top-down and a bottom-up approach. When you look at the people you want to recruit, or you make candidate personas of the type of people you want to recruit as a company, then you look at the USPs for that you have for these certain target groups, and then you sell back to the need of those target groups, and then build your brand. So from target group to a target group proposition, and that's the way you tailor it bottom up. Then you look at the USPs of the company that are accountable for all the target groups you're trying to focus and mingle in that one strategy. And that's the best way, I guess. I think that's the best approach to have towards your target group.
Ben, I know that's something that you're starting to look at in your role at Yodel. Do you want to talk me through a little bit about how you're starting that journey in your role?
Yeah, definitely. So kind of 8 weeks in, so it's pretty much as fresh as it gets, really. And the one thing that I've kind of stumbled across, and it's something that's kind of been doing the rounds for a few years now, is that in some organisations, not all, it's very difficult to get a big overarching EVP that everybody buys into, everybody kind of believes in, and other bits and pieces like that. So I think that the route that we're going is we're going to have to very much, as Rad said, very much tailor each, whether it's a department or team or segment in our business, to their individual kind of needs and their kind of their persona drivers. And the difficulty that we have as well, we have a self-employed population as well. So the actual overarching meaning of an EVP doesn't work for them because they're not employed. So for that piece, we're looking at creating just more of a people proposition in terms of, okay, they're self-employed, but acting as a supply for us, what do they still need from us as a partner? So yeah, we're very much going to be going down the whole kind of, rather than having this overarching message or message framework, let's really tailor what each kind of persona group wants, and how can we match that, not just through attraction, but through that employment life cycle as well.
Tom, is that something that the self-employed aspect, particularly as I know the Nationwide will have a sizable contractor workforce, is that something that you consider when you're building up personas for EVP? Is it something that you've started to do yet, or are planning to do?
Yeah, we are, and I think what's important is that, as Ben and Rad have alluded to, that you can't have a one-size-fits-all approach. So whether you're a contingent worker or whether you're a full-time worker at Nationwide, there's lots of very distinct differences, but what's the commonality? So one of the things that we try to evoke through the EVP is, what's our core purpose? What's the strong values? As a building society, we're not a bank. We have very distinct differences. We don't have shareholders. We're run for the benefit of our customers. So that transcends whether you're someone working in one of our branches or whether you're on our executive board. But it's about tailoring those to those specific personas. If I'm in audit or risk, I'm interested in detail. I want attention to detail. If I'm in the retail part of the business, have something that flows through all of your EVP that everyone can relate to, but naturally making it bespoke and resonate with those individual groups.
How have you taken, Tom, data into that? You mentioned briefly when we spoke earlier about the surveys that you've carried out. How have you? What kind of questions did you ask, and then how did you build that in? Because a big part of EVP design is obviously not making assumptions about what you should include and basing it on data. And Radboud, I know you'll have something to talk about on that next, so we'll come to you after Tom.
Yeah, I think so. So for me, the really important principle here is to make sure that you take the outside-in approach as opposed to the inside-out. And I know that sounds an obvious assumption, but many organisations are very good at prophesizing what they think their customers, members, users might want. But the reality on the ground can be very different. And I think that's where the data element's really important. So, testing that in the marketplace, testing what those perceptions are of the organization. It might make for hard reading in some instances, but that's intrinsic when you're talking about making an EVP that is suitable from the outside in, not just the inside out.
Yep. Radboud, what experience do you have with clients in terms of, or what approach do you take to using data to build EVP, and how do you build that into the design process?
Yeah, there are actually 3 sets of data that you can combine when looking at EVP and how it works. So if you launch the EVP and it has certain subjects, you can, what you want to do is measure the behavior on the World Wide Web, so maybe via social media or banners or whatnot, and combine that data to the behavior on the career website. So now you know what the interactions are online and what the interaction is on your career website. And even better, if you can combine that data with your ATS, with your recruitment system. So then you can see what the interactions on the web are and what the behavior on your website is. Are they looking at more pages? Is there a long time on site or not? Or maybe some content will eventually result in an application. And what you want to do is measure the quality of that application. And if you have recruitment and measurement all set, then you have a whole data set where you can, from first interaction to application or even higher, make a recruitment, marketing, and data work for you.
Yep, absolutely. The what's the difference? How do you separate? Audra's made a good point there about anonymous surveys and anonymous data versus known data. How important is it to separate it, and what difference do you see between anonymous data and known data? Because I mean, we certainly at Candidate ID we use both. We are looking at the points for both our known visitors, candidates who are within clients' ATSs or CRMs already, but we also track unknown visitors, so people that are visiting landing pages or career sites and looking at the difference there. But what difference? Well, why is it important to look at the difference between anonymous and known visitors? And B, does anyone see any difference between those?
I think it's a really, really valid point. So in my last kind of EVP project at Manchester Metropolitan University, we had a mix, and the results between both, not just from a quantitative perspective, from a qualitative as well, and not just the anonymous side, but we try to actually, as the HR police, and we can't say this and might go back to manager and we actually took a step back, and when we were collecting the data, we tried to engage operational leadership as much as we can, so they were actually collecting the data on our behalf. Because what we found were, if you go in there with, "Hi, I'm Ben from HR, we're doing this project, want to see what you think about working here, what our reputation's like, you sometimes don't get the real kind of cold-face data. Whereas if you can ask them to do that on your behalf, I think it's quite, you get more kind of more factual results, if that makes sense. And I think with the anonymous side, you do get that real kind of gritty, hard evidence, so to speak. I guess the only difficult thing is then if it's anonymous, it's hard to segment into which kind of data pools it comes from, I guess.
Does anyone use any tools for segmenting unknown visitors? Because you can obviously go down a Google Tags manager route. There's stuff that you can do there, but is there any tools or services that anyone's available that allows you to segment as much as possible?
Ask me 6 months when we've implemented Talent Brew.
That's what you're looking at just now, Talent Brew, then.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Cool.
Just as I say, so we can really kind of see that true feeling from, as Rad said, those kind of anonymous people.
What's the difference, Ben, then between, let's look at the volume versus the non-volume piece? Yodel's a good example of that. Nationwide will be a good example of that as well. But from a, if you're dealing with pickers, packers, drivers, that type of thing, through to other roles that are lower volume, how do you deal from a data perspective? Actually, how do you deal with that? How do you make sure that the results aren't skewed? Due to someone's perception of the brand already, particularly important within the delivery industry, because everyone will have a preconceived idea about the delivery companies because they've probably had some exposure to them already.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real tough one. I mean, I'm not going to kind of sit here and say Yodel has a glory brand. We have going. We have had a few issues, and we're kind of working through that. We're starting to see the green shoots. I guess when we've already started the kind of proposition creation for the kind of volume side, we've been really, really careful to kind of consider, what are these kind of, what's this kind of group of people, what's their real kind of drivers. So whereas somebody in IT or marketing, they might want to impact technology, they might want to impact our customer. A lot of the time you're getting through to the very kind of basic human drivers. And I know a lot of people talk about the future of work and automation, AI, and sorry, first rant of the day there. You need to really get on a level with, some people don't live, some people don't kind of, live to work, they work to live. And when we've been doing our kind of focus groups, it's been very face-to-face, and some of the results have been quite raw. So when we've been speaking to our drivers, their main attribute when it comes to what is a good EVP is, will I get paid on time? Can you support me and my family? And is the business safe? And although that sounds quite simplistic, that's what our driver and our volume population need, want, and value from a very, very basic human emotional level. And that's why we've been very important. We haven't done any surveys, we haven't done Google Forms. It's all been very much face-to-face, tell me how it really is. So I think sometimes when it is a survey collection point, it's easy to hide and it's easy to say satisfactory. But when you're actually sat there and I'm here today, I have my high vis, I've been practicing what I preach, you need to get that real kind of human element there. And personally, and obviously some people might agree, I think that's what a lot of organisations miss at this moment in time. Are you creating an EVP to win an award, or are you creating an EVP that really delivers on what our fellow human beings want at the end of the day?
It's come back, isn't it, to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's come back to HRM 101. I think that was the first thing that I was taught in my the psychology section of my HR lectures at university, and I think this comes down to my reason for launching this crowdcast, because we're cutting through the EVP bullshit. We're talking actually when we're crafting these EVPs, it's not necessarily just about awards, but it's actually forgetting what really matters to people. And actually, yes, there's an argument for coming up with job specific EVPs, absolutely stuff that's tailored towards each individual roles. But each, if you've got a number of customized EVPs, then they absolutely still need to meet those basic human fundamentals around. And it doesn't matter what level you're at, really. You still want to make sure that you're going to get paid on time. You still want to make sure that the business isn't going to go bust. And in 6 months, you still want to make sure that it's a brand who you're going to be proud of working ultimately. Tom, within Nationwide, within your volume space, which I would imagine would be customer service, administrator positions, is that something that you've considered in your comm strategy, something that you're building in, or is it indeed something for in terms of feedback from people who go through that applicant process in those volume roles? Is it something that they want addressed as part of the process?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think if I answer that in 2 points. So from an employer brand perspective, what we're trying to do is not do EBM for appeal. It's a waste of effort, in my opinion. It's about making sure that employer brand is for influence. And I think that way it's making sure that you're coming across as being sincere and you're giving trusted guidance. And that needs to flow through, particularly on the volume roles where, as Ben was saying, there's very much more human levers which we have to deal with there. I think from an experience point of view, so we did some work last year to talk about or find out rather how candidates and hiring managers engaged from an experience point of view throughout the process. And it sounded obvious, but the feedback that came back was we still, whilst data, digital automation is the way of the world these days, we still want to talk to a human. There's a human touch point. We want you to be sincere in your content. And when we're talking to you about a specific role, we also don't just want to talk to a computer or a survey. We want to talk to a person as well. So I think that human interaction is still really key. And that flows through from a candidate experience point of view all the way through to the content that you're in channels.
At what stage do candidates want that personal touch introduced? Do they want an early stage? Are they quite happy to wait until their application's been considered? At what point is it relevant, to them that a human being gets involved?
Yeah. Well, we found in the research that we did, it was just over 1,000 candidates and hiring managers last year, that the speed of ease in accessing that information up front was really important. So once they'd engaged in the process, then they wanted richer content, but they didn't simply want a job ad up front. They wanted a little bit more than that. I call it a feel, felt, found, trying to sort of, it's not just the role, it's the people behind the role that they wanted information on.
Yep. And the call to actions, I love tools like Meet and Engage. I love the different options that are available to candidates. But do candidates, did they express any preference in terms of can it be a chat? Does it need to be a scheduled telephone interview? Does it need to be a video interview? Did they express any feelings around that?
Yeah, and that's one of the learnings that we've taken in terms of how do we, what platforms and what channels and which ways do we look to communicate? Obviously, let's use candidate ID as an example. Some people would like the graphics. Some people will resonate better with videos. Understanding those interaction points, so not just how much people are engaging with your content, but at what points and in what format, importantly, is really important for us to understand and obviously deliver something that isn't pushed content, but is the preference of the candidate.
So that takes me nicely on to my next point, talking about how you maintain that level of candidate experience throughout the entire journey. I think, and I'm. I always look at it from the external. I look at it from the candidate's perspective. What does a candidate want to achieve? And my perception of the vast majority of experiences is we focus so much on candidate experience at the attraction and conversion stage, but once that person's in process, they're quite often forgotten about. And this is with a number of big brands. Sometimes hiring managers will let the process down. Sometimes it's recruiters, sometimes it's the technology. Radboud, be an interesting one to hear from you. How do you work with clients to make sure that they're maintaining the experience throughout the journey and not just front loaded? And how do you maintain EVP or the comms of the EVP throughout that?
Yeah, it's very important to inform your customers that when you're engaging in a marketing campaign, you actually want to build your employer brand and grow interest among certain target groups. But in the end, conversion is very important. So getting those candidates in. So as always, make sure that when we're going to make a marketing statement, that we practice what we preach and say, not only advise companies in the stage of marketing and recruitment, what happens once a person applies, and the next stage. In marketing, we don't, when somebody applies and are taken into, for example, the next stage, then the marketing can say this marketing was successful. But then the company needs to take over, or the hiring manager or the recruiter, to finalize that stage. So by telling more and more the importance of a good follow-up is actually the success of the marketing campaign.
How can we control that? What can be put in place with hiring managers, with recruiters? And this is an open question. What can we do to make sure that they're taking that message throughout, that they're maintaining that consistency, and that they're not dropping the ball? Because I feel like a lot of that hard work's put up front to do that. And one public sector organisation, for example, that I was talking to a few weeks ago, they're losing at points. They're losing 87% of candidates throughout, once they're converted, throughout that, because they're just really, really poor at communicating, and they're really, really poor at process. What solutions, guys, have you put in place in the past, or are you thinking about putting in, that will help to control that?
I mean, I think, if I could kind of jump in, because it's very quick, but I think companies, and this is going back to what I said at the beginning, companies and organisations need to stick to what they have said their EVP or their behaviours are. So I mean, there's a good one, and there's an organisation, I won't mention the name because it's a little bit mean, but an organisation very well known to me has innovation as one of their behaviours, but yet for any mid to senior level roles, it's a 3-stage assessment process. That's not very innovative, is it? It's not, and you're losing candidates. And it's so for me, it's just taking it back to basics. And almost, I know a lot of people now talk about agile in recruitment. To me, that's just common sense, best practice. Strip everything back and and I think we need to make hiring managers a lot more aware of the power of employer branding, because I still don't think that hiring managers know that, in the same way that, and for example, I take Nationwide as an example, sorry Tom to pick on you, but in the same way that people in Nationwide branches know that they are the absolute link with the customer, hiring managers need to know that they're the absolute link with candidates who can also be customers, and they have a very important part to play. So I would say, as recruiters, are we properly communicating how important a hiring manager is in the whole employee branding lifecycle? I mean, Tom, I'd be keen to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, getting that consistency is really important, isn't it? And of course, there's commercial benefits to that as well. You know, so if, for example, let's use the example of our current account holders. If we can talk to our current account holders about employment opportunities through maybe bank statements or something like that, that's something that's relevant to them. It's just personalising the process, but it's also alerting hiring managers to the art of the possible. So it's. I don't know. I still think, you know, I've been in the EBM role at Nationwide for about 3 months now. I've seen certainly a progressive outlook in terms of where they want to get to. I think it's trying to provide them with that reassurance on how to do it. Whether that's stepping away from, you know, using third-party recruiters, for example, whether it's implementing innovative new EBM tools. I think that too often they assume that direction should come from a brand, business, media relations part of the business, to communicate with those hiring managers. And I think that's where EBM really can provide that value and provide that, I guess, that linkage.
Tom, what have you put in place in your first 3 months then to do that, to communicate with line managers around it, to make sure that they feel part, as a key stakeholder, feel part of the process, that they feel involved, and that they can see that coming through in the message? What have you done? And I appreciate it's early doors, like you and Ben are both fairly new in role this year, but is there anything you can talk about that's worked particularly well?
Yeah, but if I distill that into 2 points, I think from an in-house perspective, working with the delivery teams to, I guess, understand what have been the traditional pain points, because what the pain points were last year will most likely have been the same for this year and next year, unless we come up with a suitable antidote. I think a lot of the issue has been working in isolation. So part of the job that I've tried to do so far is, how do we engage with consumer brand? How do we engage with the external relations parts of the business to bring that story together? Because there's some powerful collateral there. We're all on different journeys, but ultimately, I know it sounds corny, we're trying to get to the same destination. So, and I think sometimes it's about empowering and enabling those delivery teams to know that there is stuff that's coming down the path that is suitable, that makes their jobs easier. So it's more of breaking through that, I guess, of reversion to type, that institutionalism. That's been one of the barriers which I've been tasked with so far.
Absolutely. I'm just going to pick up on a question that Audra's asked, which I'll throw out to all three of you. How often do you refresh your EVP and update it? Anyone like to take that one?
Personally, I think 9 to 12 months, really, unless you have a very stable organisation where the culture doesn't often change, where people's attitudes don't really change, or whether you're not really changing your general people focus strategy. So, for example, we're going out phase 1 in 2 months, or depends when AIA sort it out. Hi guys. And we'll probably go phase 2 early or to mid next year, because by then we'll have gone through a few transformations. We've had new people in, people have left, culture, attitudes, policies, procedures, such as it all gets mixed up. Hence, it's not just something that you can kind of work on and then forget about for a few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And see, and when you do that, then when you know you're saying 9 to 12 months, what maybe one for Radboud. the success of EVP with your clients, or how do you use that information to decide whether they should actually look at refreshing their EVP or not? It's probably a better question.
Yeah, the cool thing within VONQ, we do this for not just for ourselves, but for loads of companies. So we have 50 of those campaigns online at the moment. So we can measure a stated benchmark of how the success should be versus the means that are used, and how the success of that EVP or that marketing towards that EVP goes within the benchmark. And if we see higher results, we can tailor the EVP or on an agile manner towards a more successful EVP. And if we see data that's going below the benchmark, then we know we need to advise the company to tweak on this.
How can someone like Ben then, and his role at Yodel, he's making changes to the EVP, he's introducing these new concepts, he's looking at job-based EVPs. How, obviously the first answer will be go and speak to VONQ and talk to them about it. But if he can't go to VONQ and talk about it, what advice would you give to someone in Ben's position who wants to benchmark externally, who wants to find out this information and make sure that he's comparing like for like?
Yeah, I think it's both. So look at actually have the qualitative talks with people that actually work for your company, or maybe the target group that might be interested in your company or suitable for your company. So I think you need to have that qualitative talk to your target audience and just find out what are the key USPs or brand positioning that are important to your target groups. And then you can use your own metrics on the website, for example, look at your interaction and still use that data. And I think those two combined can help you out, Ben.
And Radboud, if there's any external sources that you want to share, then please share them in the chat. Guys who are involved in the chat at the right-hand side, if you've got any resources that you want to share that's useful for that, if you've got any questions as well, please please feel free to ask them as well. Before I move on, Ben, Tom, is there any external benchmarking that you guys have undertaken? Is that something? Is there any resources that you can recommend? Nope, I'll move on then from Radboud.
I was waiting for Tom to jump in. Tom, were you gonna shout something then, bud?
No, I'm just having a think. No, not above and beyond what's being said. I mean, again, I feel biased that I'm probably applying more of a pure EBM hat on with this. But if we talk about measurements and stuff, for me, it's not just about tracking content on our website, stuff like that. So there's other tools that we can use that can provide us with that rich MI to reinforce or highlight if that EVP is on point or isn't slightly working or isn't being resonating as well with your audiences. Okay,
cool, great. There was something I wanted to go back to actually, Tom. You touched on it, but it's one of the kind of bugbears of mine earlier is about the alignment between a great brand, and this is more going into broader employer brand as opposed to EVP, but an organization has got a really great strong consumer brand already. They're well known, it's emotive and should in theory tie in with the persona of the candidates that they're talking about, but yet they go and spend a huge amount of money and time and resource coming up with something brand new that's really distinct and separate. Am I wrong in thinking that's a complete and utter waste of time? Do you think that companies are doing that with the right intentions, or is it are people just being spun something by agencies and suppliers that they should always have something distinct from their consumer brand?
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, there has to be a commonality between the two. It's really important. And whilst you'll have distinct differences, and you can have distinct differences, that's an important point to make. If you've got a stellar consumer brand, why on earth would you disregard or almost park that to one side to create a fictitious, if I can call it that, employer brand? I mean, at the end of the day, if someone's buying a product or they interact with a service that you're offering and they have positive experiences about that, that absolutely needs to resonate from an employer brand. Okay, it's the role of the EVM team to, I guess, set those expectations on what they're like, but most importantly, sure that if you're into the organisation, that you're also delivering against your promises. So I touched on at the start about Nationwide being a mutual. We're not a bank. We're a building society. So that's a message which you'll see through a lot of the TV advertising, but it also pulls people into the organisation because, be it for a cleansing point of view, they like the idea that they're working for an organisation that represents their people and their customers as opposed to shareholders. That's an important point that I would never want to separate from the consumer brand message into our EVM message. So in short, really important that there's a consistency, but you can have, as I said, distinct differences.
Yeah, and you know what? And I'm just going to jump in there because I think that's probably the most important point that we've discussed on this call in terms of, you see a lot of companies that their kind of EVP or P proposition or whatever it's called is an absolute galaxy away from the consumer one, and it just doesn't work. In terms of, so for example, in my last role at the university, we are not Google, we are not Facebook, we are not Tesla. We are an ex-Poly in Manchester, and a lot of people stayed at the organisation when we surveyed them due to their fellow people. So we're clearly an organisation that is based on relationships, similar to our current work that we're doing at the moment. So our kind of, obviously we've had a little bit of bad press, as I've said, but we want to become boringly reliable for our customers. Well, actually, that's got connotations for our careers as well, because we want to become a boringly reliable employer in terms of we give you the opportunity, we give you the tools, we give you that kind of that space where you can become who you want through being reliable. So I think it's really important that there has to be some kind of link, because for me, in 5 to 10 years, will there be a difference between employer brand and consumer brand? I think it'll just be one blurred kind of blob, really. Very technical phrase there.
and I think it's becoming less and less. Like one of the, I quite like the example I looked at the other day. I was looking at Virgin Atlantic, and I really like the way that Virgin Atlantic carry through the message. Their consumer brand is very much the experience. Your adventure starts here. And that type of wording, and then they carry that through in terms of the world's your oyster into their employer brand. So that there is consistency, albeit the actual brand itself in terms of look and feel might be slightly different, but actually the feeling and the emotion of traveling is still there and is still carried through. It's Radboud, how do you work with clients? What steps do you take with employers to make sure that their consumer brand is a fair their EVP is a fair reflection of the consumer brand? What do you undertake there?
Yeah, because it's a funny thing that if the core business of a company doesn't focus on the expertise of the target groups they are looking for, or great storytelling can be created by, for example, if a company releases a new feature, what the impact is on a specific target group. So. And it's very important we all stated, that keep that message aligned. And mostly we can use the B2B or B2C recruitment marketing and change that to a recruitment message. And if you keep in mind the marketing messages that are aligned and showed online, then you can tap that with the EVP, and so you always stay aligned with the communications as well as brand as the employer brand.
One particularly good example of that, and I'm going to pick Tom for that. I really like the Nationwide campaign, which is building a fintech campaign within Nationwide, because it's taking, Nationwide has been a brand they were the first brand to introduce online banking. So technology has always played a key part in that, and the message that's coming through on the Nationwide-Jobs site at the moment around their technology and architecture campaign is very much you're coming in to build a fintech startup, because technology is so important to the consumer experience. Ultimately, we cannot deal with a bank that has got poor investment in technology or doesn't have the best technologists to actually execute the campaign. So having worked with Tom a little bit on that recently, I really like that campaign. Tom, where did that idea come from within the bank, and how did you take that from the consumer element through into the recruitment EVP?
Well, I think that, along with a number of other areas of the business, our challenge is that we're a financial services organisation, and that's what people know us for, but we're much more than a financial services organisation. So in the instance of the recruitment campaign for IT architects you touched on, Billy, how do we make Nationwide synonymous as a fintech? There's a lot of areas of the business which operate in a similar mindset to digital hubs or startup fintechs that aren't curtailed by bureaucracy, something that you probably think large banks and societies. So I think for us with that campaign is, how do you bring to life the people behind it who bring that to life? I was actually going to use an example, WordCamp, the Dutch retailer, online retailer, is a great example of this. So, where you can only, it's an online e-commerce site where, fantastic high-end niche products, and they've got this wonderful consumer brand, but they resonate that with their EBM brand by effectively putting the people who make these products, they bring them to life. So instead of the products that you're just purchasing on the website each day, you actually get a chance to see the people behind working in the factories and stuff who actually create these, and every piece is handmade as well. So that for me was a good example of how you can align on a retail level, albeit you can align that consumer brand of wonderful, fantastic bespoke products and connect that to the EBM, because ultimately it's the people who come up with them, it's the people who create them in the factories and in the warehouses, and who bring those products to life. And I think that's quite a powerful message. Tom, what was the name of that brand again? Sorry. I see. My Dutch is terrible there, isn't it? Is it WordCamp? WEHKAMP. WordCamp.
This is where we've got on the call. Okay, I'll put that out there, and hopefully that's what it is. Radboud, you can correct me if it's not WEHKAMP. Anyway, but that's cool. That's another good example alongside Virgin Atlantic as well. So, Elizabeth asked a good question. Ben started to answer it. What are some best practice recommendations for proactively using sites like Kununa, Glassdoor, etc., as to where there are opportunities to improve? So I'll open that up before we finish off, guys. How do you use external review sites, and how do you build what you find there into the design and execution of your EVP?
I'll kind of kick this off. So the one thing that I will say is Glassdoor is almost like the friend or the relative that you don't like, but you have to keep them on side because it's family. Don't get me wrong, a lot of people will have a dig or be quite negative because that's the nature of society, but it's something that you have to kind of engage with, involve, and actually, if you take a bit of a pragmatic step back, a lot of the data on there is actually very usable. Not only the comments, but how many people are looking at the site, how many people might be going from Glassdoor to your own career site, how is that compared to, say, a competitor? So there's actually a lot of data on there that you can kind of take away. The big one for me, and I know, Elizabeth, I kind of said it on there, is if you are going to engage with people on there, going back to what Tom said earlier about, you need to be very, very genuine and honest. Don't promise to do something if you're not going to do it. Because I see a lot of organisations that, a candidate will say, I had a really crap induction. My manager hated me. It took me 10 years to get a laptop and I left on my 7th week. Don't say, hi, Tom, real sorry to hear that. We'll go away and fix that so it won't happen again. It's bull. If you are going to engage with people, create a strategy where you're being sincere, but you're being honest as well. And it's far better to kind of take these conversations offline and almost for each problem that you come across, create a little project off the back of it. So for me, it's being really transparent and being really, really honest, I guess.
Tom, is there anything that you can add to that?
Yeah, just to pick up, that's some really, really good points there, Ben. I think in relation to Glassdoor, so this is an area that we've been looking at closely. Traditionally, we've never responded to the feedback presented, and it's something I think going forward that we will be. But importantly, it's not just about paying lip service; it's making sure that we deliver against those promises. One of the areas which I'm looking at instigating is I know it sounds simplistic, but having a simple email address created, something like share your feedback at whatever, so that you can provide that to candidates on Glassdoor who can give you a bit more bespoke feedback. Because ultimately, unless you work with those respective areas of the business where pain points have been experienced, you're never going to improve those processes. And the last thing you want is to effectively promise a Ferrari and deliver a bicycle, because you'll be hostage to fortune. You'll be held to account. Be it in a newspaper headline where they cut and paste tweets that you're replying, or an extract from Glassdoor. So it's really important that you follow through on what you're promising.
And that was something that we found, just to kind of finish off before we do that. But what we found that when we run campaigns for clients, running them daily, what we tend to find is as soon as you're asking some kind of question, so we part of one of our engagement, the ways we try and increase engagement is by asking questions of prospective candidates, nothing job related necessarily, but asking about what they if it's technology, what technology do they want to use in the future, or what things have they seen that are pretty cool, and just lots of different ways, and we add them into landing pages. But by simply starting to ask questions, what we tend to find is that candidates give us feedback about other things that have happened, and in particular they give us feedback about the hiring process or the interview process and the application process the application process processes they've went through. So I think we need to be asking questions earlier. I think we need to, I think Tom's point's great about having that open email address, but should we be asking candidates as they move through the process, more, what do you think of this? Is something going wrong now? The earlier you know about something, the earlier you can fix it. And if if you ask a question, for example, between the first and second interview, just for example, you find out a problem there, could that save a hire? Could that mean the difference between losing a fantastic gold standard candidate and saving them? Could that happen? And is that something that's being done?
Billy, I think that's a really good point. I mean, there's a really great Australian company called Border who have come up with a really clever solution to sort of manage that. It could be negative feedback during the onboarding process. So before the candidate's about to start, and once they've started with you, clearly, concisely and frequently communicating with them, but reassuring them throughout the process, be it through checks and things that they may have to complete beforehand, so when they actually start in the organisation. It's a clever bit of technology, but it effectively addresses that need of putting the arm around the shoulder and making sure that you don't let the problem escalate to a point where you can't actually fix it, and it has an adverse effect with your wider recruitment process.
Yep, and I think that's why it really scares me. I mean, we've all been to a conference or a networking event or God knows what else, where you'll ask the audience, put your hand up if you've applied for a job with your own company. and no one raises their hands. It's the most simple thing that you can do. And I know for a fact that Nationwide, one organisations that they've done loads of work into actually mapping every single step, every moment of truth, every possible delay or lag, because candidates don't mind. I'm not saying that they don't mind a long process, but if you're honest with them, they know that the application process takes 4 weeks. If you tell them it's 1 week and it takes 4, well, you've ruined it. Whereas if you're upfront and say, well, look, I'll be honest with you, the hiring manager's on holiday, the administrators, her kitten's given birth or whatever it is, so the process might be longer. Just be open and honest. It's not CIPD level 27. It's just basic. Just be really, really simple and transparent.
On that point, Ben, obviously there'd be an adverse reputational impact if we don't get that right. Billy, you mentioned about Virgin Atlantic. There's the good example of Virgin Media through their work a few years ago, who attributed, I think it was £4.6 million in lost sales to people who've had a poor candidate experience, who basically said, you know what, I'm not going to have a mobile phone with you, I'm not going to have my broadband with you, I'm so upset about how I've been treated or the experience that I've received pre-post application that I'm going to cut ties with you. So, you know, it's not just the reputational connotations, there can be adverse, you know, as well.
Yep, absolutely, and that's a good point to finish on. You know, we need to be aware that what we do as recruiters, you know, not only has an impact on our resource planning and our workforce planning and how many bums we can get on seats, but it's that old, you know, cliche about, you know, one bad experience during the recruitment process will impact heavily on the success of the consumer brand too. So listen, thanks so much, guys. Thanks, Radboud. Thanks, Ben, and thanks, Tom. I really enjoyed that today. Thank you very much to the attendees for joining us. Thanks for taking your lunchtime out to do that. You'll get a recording through of this very, very shortly, but you'll be able to watch it on demand on Facebook too. Please do get in touch if there's any questions that you've got. VONQ are a fantastic specialist to talk to about EVP. They're based in the Netherlands and in the UK. Ben does some fantastic work at Yodel and loves talking about it. I'm sure you can reach out to him directly, but if not, you'll see him at an event coming soon, I'm sure. And Tom, Tom, you're speaking with us actually very soon, aren't you? At one of an event that's coming up. I think you're doing something with Adam, so I'm sure you'll see Tom on the circuit this year as well, and I'm sure he'll take any questions directly. Thank you all very, very much indeed. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and please tune in to our next Talent Talk next week. Thanks a lot.
Thanks everyone, see you later.
Cheers, guys.
Yeah.